So I want you to picture this. It is the early 1960s, and we are in this quiet, just completely unremarkable English suburb of Ruislip.
Right.
Specifically, we are looking at this cozy tree-lined street called Cranley Drive. And if you were standing on the pavement there, you would see like the perfect cinematic snapshot of suburban tranquility.
Yeah, the classic post-war dream.
Exactly. You have got bicycles just abandoned on manicured front lawns. There are these glass milk bottles sitting patiently on doorsteps. You can practically hear the neighbors trading polite pleasantries over their low garden fences.
It is the absolute picture of domestic peace,
Yeah.
the kind of neighborhood where, the biggest scandal might be someone failing to return a borrowed lawnmower.
Right, exactly. But now I want you to take that idyllic, cozy image and I want you to just slice it right down the middle.
Oh, here we go.
Cut to the subterranean reality beneath this postcard. Because beneath the kitchen floorboards of this very pleasant bungalow at number 45 Cranley Drive, there is a high-speed radio transmitter.
Getting right under their feet.
Right. And up in the attic, hidden among the rafters, a 22-meter aerial snakes invisibly through the dust. And in the study, just tucked inside the bindings of these antique books, are microdots.
Which are just fascinating.
Yeah, these are photographs shrunk down to the size of a printed period, and they're just crammed with stolen military secrets.
The contrast is staggering when you really think about it. Above ground, you have tea parties and polite conversation, but below ground, you have the technological nerve center of, well, one of the most sophisticated espionage rings of the 20th century.
And the architects of this whole suburban nightmare, they were this cheerful, middle-aged New Zealand couple named Peter and Helen Kroger.
Supposedly.
Right, supposedly. They were antiquarian book dealers, they threw dinner parties. They were beloved by their neighbors.
Yeah.
Here's the twist that kicks off this entire deep dive we are doing today. Peter and Helen Kroger did not exist.
No, they were entirely fabricated identities. It was the culminating masterpiece of decades of covert operation.
They were, in reality, Morris and Lona Cohen. They were American-born Soviet agents. And the question we are asking you to keep in your mind today is this. How could a quiet couple selling old books on a tree-lined street be responsible for the single most dangerous intelligence failure of the entire Cold War?
It really is the ultimate question.
Our mission today is to unpack this mind-bending true story. But, as we reverse engineer this operation, we have to look really closely at the political radicalization that made it possible in the first place.
Yeah, you cannot skip that part.
We are talking about Marxism, communism, the ideological battlegrounds of the 20th century. And I just want to say right up front, as we dig into this, our job here is not to judge or endorse the ideologies of the sources we are reviewing.
Right, absolutely not.
We are acting as historical forensic analysts. We are impartially mapping out exactly how these specific beliefs drove these individuals to commit treason without validating the beliefs themselves. We are not taking sides here.
That historical forensics approach is vital, I think. Because, you do not just wake up one morning and decide to bury a high-frequency transmitter under your kitchen tiles.
No, you definitely do not.
To understand the Cohens, we really have to understand the specific furnace that forged them. We have to go back to the ashes of the American dream in the 1930s.
Okay, let us unpack this. So we are starting in 1910. Morris Cohen is born in Harlem to Eastern European Jewish immigrants. And Lona Petka is born a few years later in Massachusetts to Polish Catholic immigrants.
Right, these are distinctly working-class families.
Yeah. And then the Great Depression hits.
And I think we really need to define what the Great Depression actually looked like for these specific immigrant communities. Because this was not a modern recession where your stock portfolio takes a hit and maybe you delay buying a new car.
Right, it was way more visceral than that.
It was a catastrophic, highly visible collapse of the capitalist machine. We are talking about thousands of banks physically shuttering their doors, evaporating people's life savings literally overnight. We are talking about eviction riots in the Bronx and Harlem. Families would literally have their furniture thrown onto the pavement by landlords.
So it is not just poverty. It is a profound psychological trauma. It is watching this system that you were told would reward your hard work completely disintegrate right in front of your eyes.
Exactly. The disillusionment was absolute. And, well, nature abhors a vacuum, right?
Sure.
So into that massive void of institutional trust, radical politics rushed in. For people like Morris and Lona who were coming of age in the 1930s, Marxism was not some distant, abstract academic theory debated by professors in tweed jackets.
That was real life.
It presented itself as a tangible, actionable answer. It offered a very forceful, systematic explanation for why their world was broken, and more importantly, it offered a blueprint for how to rebuild it.
I can totally see how that appeals to a desperate population, but I have to push back a little here.
Okay, go ahead.
Because experiencing crushing poverty and being angry at the system that does not automatically turn someone into a foreign agent,
That's fair.
it is the difference between like being angry at a corporation so you join a labor union versus being so angry that you actively break into the factory to steal trade secrets for a rival corporation.
Right, that is a big leap.
So how on earth did they cross that line from domestic activists to international spies?
Well, the leap from activist to operative really comes down to the psychological profile of what intelligence agencies classify as the true believer.
The true believer.
Yeah. If we look at the broader history of espionage, most spies are actually mercenaries. They commit treason because they are being blackmailed or because they have massive gambling debts or simply because they are thrill seekers.
Right. It is usually about money or leverage.
Exactly. But the Cohens fall into none of those categories. They were entirely ideological.
So they were not in it for the cash. They were in it for the cause.
They operated on an absolute, unshakable certainty that the arc of history was bending toward the Soviet experiment. I mean, Morris was actually expelled from the University of Illinois for communist agitation.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah. And Lona threw herself into very aggressive labor organizing in New York. They shared this profound conviction that the capitalist system they lived under was fundamentally unjust and beyond repair.
So to them, the Soviet Union was not the bad guy.
No, not at all. To them, the Soviet Union was not a foreign adversary. It was the vanguard of a righteous alternative for humanity.
Okay, so their radicalization is deeply genuine. But there is still a massive gap between handing out pamphlets in New York and transmitting encrypted radio signals to Moscow.
Oh, absolutely.
So how do you go from a radical activist to a recruited, highly trained Soviet spy?
The catalyst that bridges that gap is the Spanish Civil War. In 1937, Morris makes this really life-defining decision. He travels to Spain to fight against General Francisco Franco's fascist uprising.
Wow.
He enlists in the International Brigades under the assumed name Israel Altman. And you have to understand, for the Western left in the 1930s, Spain was the ultimate moral crucible.
It was where the theories became reality.
Yes, it was the place where the political theories discussed in drawing rooms were finally tested in blood.
The battle lines were incredibly clear to them. Fascism on one side, the people on the other. And Morris actually gets wounded in the fighting, right?
He does. He sustains injuries on the front lines. And it is while he is recovering that the crucial pivot happens. He encounters a man named Amedeo Sabatini.
Okay, here's that.
Sabatini is not just a fellow soldier. He is a talent spotter for the NKVD, which is the Soviet intelligence apparatus that would eventually become the KGB.
Ah, I see.
Sabatini's job is to scan the ranks of these idealistic foreign volunteers and find the ones who have the discipline and the absolute ideological devotion required for intelligence work.
And he sees that in Morris.
He looks at this injured, fiercely intelligent young American from Harlem and sees an unparalleled asset.
Because Morris has already proven he is willing to die for the cause. He is blooded.
Furthermore, he has an authentic American passport. And recruitment in this era was not a cinematic moment with a briefcase full of cash and a secret handshake in a dark alley.
Right. It is not James Bond.
It was a gradual deepening of a relationship based on shared political devotion. Sabatini cultivated Morris for months. By 1938, Morris is officially recruited into an illegal residentura.
Okay, I want to pause on that term, illegal, because in the intelligence world, that means they have a zero official cover.
Right.
Like no diplomatic immunity, no embassy to run to if things go wrong.
That is the defining feature of their entire career. If a diplomat gets caught spying, they get declared persona non grata and put on a plane home.
Right, they just get deported.
But if an illegal gets caught, they go to prison for decades or they face the electric chair. They are entirely on their own in hostile territory, sustained strictly by their operational discipline and their ideology.
And when Morris returns to the U.S., he brings that operational identity back with him. He is no longer just Morris Cohen, he is a sleeper agent.
Right.
And by 1941, he recruits his wife, Lona. From that moment on, their marriage and their espionage operation become a single, inseparable unit. It is just wild to think about. Their wedding vows basically included a commitment to international espionage.
It locked them into a shared secret world that no one else could ever enter. And the timing of this is critical, by the way,
Why is that?
because they are fully operational as the 1940s arrive. The Second World War completely redrawn the geopolitical map, and suddenly their ideological beliefs are about to be tested on an apocalyptic scale.
Quite literally apocalyptic. Because the focus of Soviet intelligence in the U.S. shifts toward the most heavily guarded scientific enterprise in human history.
Manhattan Project.
Yes, the American program to build the atomic bomb. And this brings us to one of the most fascinating figures in this whole story, the inside man, Theodore Hall.
Theodore Hall represents a completely different avenue of espionage. He was a genuine prodigy. He graduated high school at 14, went to Harvard, and by January 1944, he was assigned to the massive secret laboratory at Los Alamos as a junior physicist.
And how old was he?
He was 18 years old.
18. Most 18-year-olds are figuring out how to do their own laundry, and this kid is working on the implosion design for the plutonium bomb.
Exactly.
The very mechanism that would eventually be dropped on Nagasaki. The sheer pressure cooker environment of Los Alamos must have been overwhelming.
You have to imagine thousands of the world's brightest minds isolated in the New Mexico desert, racing against the belief that Nazi Germany might be building a bomb of their own.
Right. The stakes could not be higher.
But as it became clear that Germany was defeated, the narrative shifted. Hall was working on the most destructive force ever conceived, and he began to experience a profound moral crisis.
And because he was so young and maybe possessed that specific kind of adolescent intellectual hubris, he makes this rogue moral calculation.
What do you mean by that?
Well, Hall looks at the sheer city-annihilating power of what they're building, and he concludes that no single nation, not even his own, should possess a monopoly on it. He believed the world would actually be safer if that power were distributed, if there was a balance of terror.
He was independently formulating the concept of mutually assured destruction before the term even existed.
Exactly.
He looked at a post-war world where America held the only nuclear weapon, and he foresaw an era of unchecked imperial dominance.
The best analogy I can come up with is a modern tech scenario. Imagine a rogue engineer today working at a massive tech monopoly, and they are developing a highly dangerous, omnipotent artificial intelligence model.
Okay, I see where you were going.
Something that could control global infrastructure. And this engineer just decides entirely on their own authority to open source the core code to a rival superpower simply to ensure no single corporation or country controls the fate of humanity.
That is a great comparison.
It is staggering arrogance, but it is framed in their own mind as extreme idealism.
Taking that analogy further, Hall did not just leak the concept. He leaked the precise underlying architecture. And he was not blackmailed. He walked right into Soviet espionage of his own volition.
Just volunteer it?
Yes. He made contact through a college friend with communist ties in New York, and eventually, the complex chain of Soviet intelligence couriers led directly to Lona Cohen.
Which sets the stage for one of the most intense sequences in espionage history. August 1945. The Albuquerque tension.
Oh, this is incredible.
The stakes could not possibly be higher. The Trinity test has just proven the bomb works. So Lona Cohen travels by train from New York to New Mexico to receive the actual blueprints for the atomic bomb from Theodore Hall.
She's a woman traveling alone in the high desert, operating under a very thin cover story. The plan is simple but incredibly fragile. She is supposed to meet Hall outside a specific church in Albuquerque on a Sunday. She is to receive the documents and immediately return to New York.
And here is where human fallibility nearly derails world history. Hall gets the date wrong.
It highlights the chaotic reality of espionage. In the middle of this world historical operation, a teenage physicist simply mixes up his calendar. He does not show up.
I want to put the listener in Lona's shoes for a second. You are standing outside a church in the blistering New Mexico heat. You know the FBI is heavily monitoring the entire region around Los Alamos.
Right.
Your contact does not appear. What do? Most people would panic. They would assume the contact was arrested and the FBI is watching the church right now. They would abort the mission, burn their cover identity, and run.
And that is exactly what a mercenary spy would do.
Right.
But Lona is a true believer. Her discipline overrides her fear. When he does not show, she leaves quietly, and she comes back the next Sunday.
And he does not show again.
Unbelievable. She comes back a third time, a fourth time. For 4 consecutive Sundays, she waits in that hostile environment. She tells no one. Finally, on the 5th Sunday, Hall appears.
The psychological endurance that takes is staggering, and when he finally arrives, what he hands her is nothing less than the engineering heart of the American atomic bomb.
Yes.
It is not just a sketch. It is detailed technical information about the plutonium implosion design.
And we should clarify why that specific information was so lethal. The original atomic bomb design, the one dropped on Hiroshima, was a relatively simple gun-type uranium bomb. You essentially shoot one piece of uranium into another to create a critical mass.
Okay, sounds simple enough in theory.
But uranium was incredibly hard to enrich. Plutonium was easier to produce, but you could not use the gun method. You had to use implosion.
Right, because if you shoot plutonium together, it detonates prematurely and fizzles out. I remember reading that in the sources.
Exactly the problem. The physicists at Los Alamos had to invent a way to take a sphere of plutonium and compress it perfectly from all sides simultaneously using conventional explosives.
So it is an engineering nightmare.
Absolutely. They had to design explosive lenses that directed the shock waves inward with microsecond precision. The mathematics and the metallurgy behind this were monumental. It took the greatest minds in America years to solve.
And Theodore Hall just hands the solution to Lona Cohen on a piece of paper. He gives the Soviets the shortcut.
He did.
So she has the blueprints. Now she has to get them back to New York. And this leads to the train sequence. If this were a movie, this would be the viral clip everyone shares on social media.
It is the ultimate masterclass in tradecraft under extreme pressure.
Picture the sensory details of this moment. Lona is on the train heading back east. The documents are hidden in her luggage. You have the rhythmic clack of the train tracks. Suddenly, the doors at the end of the carriage open.
Military police board the train.
Yes. They are moving methodically down the aisle, conducting random, thorough searches of passenger luggage. Lona knows exactly what she is carrying. If they find those papers, execution for treason is an absolute certainty.
No question about it.
The windows are sealed, the train is moving, there is nowhere to run.
Consider the physiological response to that moment. Adrenaline flooding the system, the urge to flee or hide. A panicked person would try to shove the papers deeper into their suitcase or try to run to the bathroom to flush them.
But what does Lona do? She takes the papers detailing the atomic blueprints, and she folds them neatly inside her daily newspaper. She just holds it in her lap.
Which seems dangerously exposed.
But here is where it gets brilliant. When the MP reaches her seat and demands to search her bags, she does not freeze. She casually turns to the soldier, hands him the newspaper, and politely asks if he could hold it for her while she wrestles her heavy bags open for his inspection.
The audacity of that move is hard to overstate. This opens up a fascinating window into how high-level tradecraft actually functions.
How so?
Well, we often think of spycraft as gadgets, hidden cameras, invisible ink. But the most effective tradecraft is psychological. Lona weaponized social conditioning.
Wait, break that down for me. How is asking someone to hold a newspaper weaponizing social conditioning?
Because she fundamentally understood the psychology of the soldier in front of her. That MP was trained to maintain authority, but he was also socially conditioned to accept a polite, mundane request from a well-dressed civilian woman.
Oh, wow.
By asking him to hold the paper so she could comply with his authoritative demand to open the bags, she created a behavioral loop. He reflexively took the object. It short-circuited his suspicion.
So the guard is literally holding the stolen secrets to the atomic bomb in his hands while he rummages through her clothes looking for stolen secrets.
Yes. And finding nothing in the bags, he hands the newspaper back to her, thanks her for her cooperation, and moves to the next row. It is a magic trick using human psychology. She played his mind perfectly.
She did. She survives the journey, arrives in New York, goes to the Soviet consulate, and hides the blueprints inside a box of Kleenex tissues. She hands that tissue box to a young KGB engineer named Leonid Kvasnikov.
The fate of the 20th century handed over in a tissue box.
It is wild, and we have to look at the massive geopolitical shockwave of that handoff, because in August 1949, the Soviet Union tested its first atomic bomb, known as Joe-1.
And the design of Joe-1 was virtually an exact replica of the American plutonium implosion device dropped on Nagasaki.
A perfect copy.
The intelligence Lona brought back allowed the Soviets to bypass years of dead-end research and failed tests.
This was a full 4 years ahead of what American intelligence had predicted. I read that President Truman was briefed on the radioactive fallout detected from the Soviet test, and he initially refused to believe it.
Yeah, he thought it must have been a reactor accident, not a successful weapon.
Truman's denial is telling because it highlights how completely this shattered the bedrock of Western strategic planning. The U.S. military establishment truly believed they had a monopoly that would last deep into the 1950s, giving them ultimate leverage in post-war negotiations in Europe and Asia.
And that monopoly vanished overnight. The timeline Lona Cohen accelerated plunged the world immediately into a nuclear standoff.
So they pull off the heist of the century, they change the global balance of power. But the golden rule of espionage is that a successful operation eventually breeds exposure.
Always.
The more data you transmit, the more couriers you use, the larger your paper trail becomes. And by 1950, the American spy network is rapidly collapsing around them.
The dominoes started falling fast. Elizabeth Bentley, an American who had acted as a major Soviet courier, defected to the FBI and started naming names.
Right.
Then, Klaus Fuchs, a British physicist who had also worked at Los Alamos and passed secrets to the Soviets, was arrested in the UK. His confession led investigators to his American courier, Harry Gold, which eventually led to the arrest of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg.
And there's another massive factor happening in the background here that the public did not know about at the time, the Venona project.
Venona is the hidden engine of the FBI's crackdown. During the war, the U.S. Army's Signal Intelligence Service began intercepting encrypted diplomatic cables sent between Moscow and Soviet consulates in the U.S.
But they could not read them at first, right?
Right. For a long time, they were unreadable. But by the late 40s, cryptanalysts began to crack the code. They started reading Soviet communications from years earlier.
It is like finding the enemy's playbook 5 years after the game, but realizing the same players are still on the field. Venona intercepts started revealing the code names of dozens of agents operating in the U.S.
And as the FBI uses Bentley, Fuchs, and Venona to roll up the network, the Cohens get the emergency order from their handler.
Which is what?
Leave. Now, do not pack your bags. Do not say goodbye to your families. Just vanish.
Which proves that true espionage is not just about stealing secrets. It is about knowing how to erase yourself from the face of the earth. They leave everything behind in New York, and for nearly 4 years, they exist in a terrifying geopolitical limbo.
They are smuggled across the border to Mexico, then to Eastern Europe, and eventually to Moscow. But they do not stay there.
No.
The KGB realizes the Cohens are too valuable to retire, so they embark on a massive coordinated effort to build the Cohens a new legend.
Let us define legend for the listener, because we hear that term in spy movies, but it is not just a fake passport you print in a basement.
Far from it. A legend is a flawless, three-dimensional false life designed to withstand rigorous counterintelligence scrutiny. It requires accumulated documents, verifiable histories, and deep backstopping.
So it is an entire life built from scratch.
Yes. The KGB decided the Cohens would become Peter and Helen Kroger, a mild-mannered New Zealand couple. To make this work, the Cohens actually traveled to the Pacific.
Wait, really?
Yeah, they spent time in Australia and New Zealand, learning the regional accents, understanding the local culture, collecting legitimate receipts, and applying for real passports using forged foundational documents.
They needed to cease being working-class American radicals from New York and genuinely embody the persona of affluent, polite Commonwealth citizens. And that 4-year transformation brings us to 1954 and the second massive act of their career.
The Portland hub.
Yes. The freshly minted Krogers arrive in England. They buy that unremarkable bungalow at 45 Cranley Drive in Ruislip, and they set up shop as antiquarian book dealers.
Which, from an operational standpoint, is an absolute stroke of genius for a cover story.
Why is that? Just because Morris actually liked books?
Well, that is a key part of it. Morris was deeply intellectual. His passion for rare books was authentic. The strongest cover stories are always built on a foundation of truth.
Right. It makes the lie easier to sell.
But practically speaking, an antiquarian book business provides the perfect logistical camouflage.
Because if you are running a spy ring, you have weird things happening at your house.
Exactly. An international book dealing business explains why large, irregular quantities of heavy mail are arriving at the house from all over the world.
Oh, that makes sense.
It explains why you keep strange working hours, or why you own sophisticated photographic equipment to take pictures of rare manuscripts. It explains occasional visits from eccentric foreigners. It normalizes everything that counterintelligence officers look for.
And crucially, as our sources point out, old book bindings are the perfect hiding place for the primary tool of their new trade microdots.
The bungalow became what intelligence services call a dead letterbox and a high-level communications hub.
I really want to dig into the technical reality of the microdot because it sounds like science fiction. How do you take a full-size classified document and shrink it down to the size of a period at the end of a sentence?
It requires a highly specialized, multi-step photographic process. First, you photograph the document using standard high-resolution film.
Okay.
Then you take that negative, put it under a specialized microscope equipped with a reversed lens, and project that image onto a glass plate coated with a very specific, ultra-fine grain aniline dye emulsion.
So you were basically taking a picture of a picture through a microscope backwards.
That is a great way to visualize it. You develop that microscopic speck of emulsion, punch it out with a specialized syringe, and you have a dot of film a millimeter wide containing a perfectly readable schematic.
That is unbelievable.
Helen Kroger-Lona would take these dots and carefully pry open the spines of the antique books Morris was mailing to clients in Paris or Geneva. She would glue the microdot beneath the binding tape, seal the book, and mail it off. The receiver in Europe would extract the dot, put it under a microscope, and read the stolen intelligence.
It is brilliant, invisible, and terrifyingly efficient. So the Cohens are running the communications hub in Ruslip, but they are not the ones breaking into military bases. The ringleader orchestrating the actual theft is a guy named Gordon Lonsdale.
Gordon Lonsdale is one of the most fascinating characters of the Cold War. He presented himself to London society as a gregarious, charming Canadian businessman who sold jukeboxes and bubblegum machines.
Bubblegum machines, you cannot make this up.
He drove fast cars, frequented nightclubs, and always had a smile and a drink ready for anyone he met.
But he was not Canadian.
No. His real name was Kudon Malady. He was a highly sophisticated KGB officer. As a youth, he had lived with an aunt in California, which is where he perfected his flawless North American accent and internalized Western cultural mannerisms.
Well, he fit right in.
He was the quintessential illegal resident, smooth, adaptable, and completely untraceable to the Soviet embassy.
So you have Malady playing the playboy businessman in London, and the Cohens playing the quiet, bookish couple in the suburbs. What was this network actually targeting?
Their target was arguably the most sensitive military installation in Britain at the time. The Admiralty Underwater Weapons Establishment at Portland, situated on the southern English coast.
What did they do there?
This was the premier research facility where Britain, and by extension NATO, developed its technology to detect Soviet submarines.
Let us break down the assets they used to penetrate Portland. Lonsdale cultivated two inside informants. The first is Harry Houghton.
Harry Houghton is the classic counterexample to the Cohens. If the Cohens were true believers driven by ideology, Houghton was driven by base human flaws.
He was in it for the money.
Absolutely. He was a clerk at the establishment. He had previously served a stint in Warsaw, where he had been compromised by Polish intelligence due to his heavy drinking and black market dealing.
So he was already a known security risk.
He was deeply resentful of the naval officers who ordered him around. He was financially stretched, and he felt he deserved a better life. He was entirely susceptible to flattery and envelopes stuffed with cash.
He was a mercenary. And the second asset was his girlfriend, Ethel Bunty G.
Bunty G was the opposite of Houghton in temperament. She was a woman of quiet, unremarkable efficiency. She was an impeccable filing clerk who lives with her elderly relatives.
So nobody suspected her.
But crucially, because she was so trusted and overlooked, she had unrestricted access to the safes containing some of the most sensitive blueprints in the entire building.
So we have the pipeline established. Bunty G pulls the classified documents from the safe. She passes them to her boyfriend, Harry Houghton. Houghton takes the train to London and hands them to Lonsdale.
Right.
Lonsdale drives out to the Ruslip bungalow and hands them to the Cohens, who photograph them, shrink them into microdots, hide them in books, or transmit the most urgent data directly to Moscow using the high-speed radio under the floorboards.
It was a remarkably efficient, closed-loop system, and it ran successfully for years.
But we need to talk about the so what of this intelligence. What exactly were they stealing? Because earlier we talked about the atomic bomb. Everyone understands why stealing a nuclear weapon is bad. It goes boom. But here at Portland, they are stealing ASDC sonar manuals, specifications for the HMS Dreadnought, which was Britain's first nuclear-powered submarine, and deep technical details about Borg-Warner propeller noise reduction mechanisms. It sounds like highly dry technical engineering data.
It is dry engineering data, but the strategic implications are arguably just as massive as the atomic bomb. To understand why, we have to talk about the physics of the Cold War ocean.
Okay, I was trying to picture this for the listener. Imagine you and I are playing a life-or-death game of hide-and-seek, and we are locked inside a pitch-black warehouse.
Okay, a pitch-black warehouse.
The only way I can survive is that I have a pair of highly advanced night vision goggles. But while I was not looking, you managed to steal the blueprints to my goggles.
Like this.
Now, you know exactly how my goggles process light, what their blind spots are, what frequencies they cannot detect, and how to camouflage yourself so my specific goggles look right past you.
That is a perfect analogy. The pitch-black warehouse is the North Atlantic. In submarine warfare, you cannot see the enemy. Light does not travel through the deep ocean, but sound does.
Right.
Sound actually travels much faster and further in water than in air. The entire Cold War underwater was a game of acoustic detection. Western navies relied on highly advanced passive sonar arrays, essentially massive underwater microphones, to listen for Soviet submarines.
So hearing them was the only way to find them.
Being able to hear an enemy sub before it could get close enough to launch its nuclear missiles was the absolute foundation of NATO's maritime deterrence strategy.
So by stealing the ASDDC sonar manuals...
By stealing those manuals, Lonsdale and the Cohens provided the Soviets with the exact acoustic signatures that Western sonar was calibrated to listen for.
Wow.
And the Borg-Warner propeller specs were even more damaging. When a submarine propeller turns, it creates tiny bubbles that collapse a process called cavitation. That cavitation creates a loud, distinct noise. The British had developed a mechanical way to silence that cavitation.
And Houghton and G handed those silencing blueprints to the KGB.
Exactly. It allowed Soviet naval engineers to redesign their entire submarine fleet. They built quieter propellers and tailored their submarine hulls specifically to evade the exact frequencies British and American sonar was searching for.
So they literally became invisible to the sonar.
They effectively neutralized the West's night vision goggles. It forced NATO to spend billions of dollars redesigning their own detection networks. The intelligence flowing out of that Ruslip bungalow fundamentally changed the rules of the undersea war.
And they operated this pipeline completely unnoticed for 7 years, from 1954 to 1961. Which brings us to the inevitable downfall, the crackdown.
Yes.
Because as we see time and time again in espionage history, even the most sophisticated technological spying is usually brought down by the oldest human flaw.
Betrayal from within the ranks.
Enter a man known to Western intelligence by the incredibly dramatic codename Sniper.
Sniper's real name was Michael Galiniewski. He was a high-ranking officer in Polish intelligence who had broad access to Soviet bloc espionage operations across Europe.
And what does he do?
In 1959, driven by a mix of ideological disillusionment and personal grievances, he started secretly mailing letters to the CIA in America, offering to pass them information.
And one of the tips Sniper passes along is a highly specific, damaging piece of intelligence. He tells the CIA that Moscow has successfully recruited a spy operating inside a British naval facility and that this spy is passing along top-secret naval documents.
The CIA immediately hands that tip over to MI5, the British Domestic Security Service. MI5 quietly begins a massive audit of the personnel at the Portland Admiralty Underwater Weapons Establishment.
And when you are looking for a spy, you look for anomalies in behavior.
It does not take long for Harry Houghton to light up their radar like a beacon.
Because Harry is incredibly sloppy. He is the weak link.
He was a textbook security risk. He's a mid-level clerk on a modest government salary. But suddenly, he is buying a new car, he is buying a house, he is throwing money around at the local pubs, buying rounds of drinks for everyone. He was openly living far beyond his verifiable means.
And there were actual warning signs that were ignored. I read that his ex-wife had literally gone to the Admiralty security officer back in 1956 to complain that Harry was bringing classified papers home and acting suspiciously.
And she was entirely dismissed.
It's ignored.
The security officer wrote her off as a bitter, vindictive ex-spouse trying to make trouble. It is a classic intelligence failure ignoring human intelligence because it does not fit your preconceived biases.
Right.
But once MI5 gets the tip from Sniper, they look at Houghton's spending and the picture becomes undeniable. They start a covert surveillance operation.
They start tailing Houghton. They watch him take the train from Portland up to London. And they observe him making contact with a mysterious, well-dressed man in public places, parks, cafes. That man is Gordon Lonsdale.
So MI5 pivots. They realize Houghton is just the informant. They want the handler. They put Lonsdale under intense surveillance. They tap his phones. They follow his car. They monitor his meetings.
And it is Lonsdale's rigid operational routine that finally burns the Cohens.
Is the paradox of tradecraft. You rely on routine to maintain security, but a routine is predictable. Lonsdale was meticulous.
Like clockwork.
And every Saturday evening, regular as a metronome, the MI5 surveillance teams tracked his car, leaving central London and driving out to a quiet, unassuming bungalow at 45 Cranley Drive in Ruislip.
The net is closing. MI5 knows who the players are. They are just waiting to catch them in the act of transferring documents to build a bulletproof legal case. But then an external event forces their hand.
Yes, the situation in Poland.
Right. Out in Poland, a Goleniewski sniper realizes the KGB is closing in on his identity. His position becomes too dangerous. He has to flee and defect openly to the West.
Which creates an immediate ticking clock for MI5. If Goleniewski defects, the KGB will instantly realize that everything he knew is compromised. Moscow will immediately transmit emergency orders to the Portland Ring.
Burn your materials, abandon your identities, and vanish, just like the Cohens did in New York a decade earlier.
Exactly.
MI5 knows they cannot let these master operatives slip through their fingers again, so they pull the trigger. January 7th, 1961, the hammer falls.
It is a massive synchronized takedown across southern England.
Let us paint the picture of the arrests, because it plays out like the climax of a thriller. Down near the Old Vic Theatre in London, amidst the busy Saturday evening crowds, Houghton and G meet Lonsdale.
They are carrying a shopping bag.
Yes. As they make the exchange, special branch officers swarm them. The shopping bag is seized. Inside, they find 2 packages of highly classified documents, including 310 undeveloped photographs of the HMS Dreadnought nuclear submarine.
Caught red-handed.
Lonsdale's Playboy facade drops instantly. The handcuffs go on.
But the real tension, the true climax of the operation, is happening out in the quiet suburbs. At the exact same moment the trap springs in London, Superintendent George Smith of Special Branch walks up the path of 45 Cranley Drive and knocks on the door.
And the interaction that follows is legendary in the annals of Cold War history. Peter Kroger Morris Cohen opens the door. Superintendent Smith pushes his way inside, tells them he knows exactly who they are, and informs them they are under arrest for espionage.
The game is over.
And Helen Kroger Lona Cohen, standing in her own living room, maintains that same supernatural, ice-cold composure she displayed on the train in New Mexico with the atomic secrets 16 years earlier.
She does not panic.
She does not scream, she does not cry, she does not deny it. She just asks Smith very politely if she can quickly go to the kitchen to stoke the boiler before they take her away into the cold English winter evening.
It sounds like such a reasonable domestic request from a middle-aged woman. But Superintendent Smith is a seasoned veteran of counter-espionage. He knows exactly how these people operate.
What was she really doing?
He knows that stoking the boiler is a polite euphemism for throwing her handbag into the incinerator.
She wanted to burn the evidence.
She knew she was caught, but her first instinct was operational security. She had to destroy the communication protocols. But Smith looks at her and says, "I am sorry, Mrs. Kroger, but I will have to see what is in that handbag first."
And the jig is finally up. He opens the handbag. Inside, they find the microdots, the specialized magnifying glasses, and the cryptographic one-time pads.
And finding the one-time pads is the smoking gun.
Let us pause and explain what a one-time pad is, because I always assumed any code could eventually be cracked by a supercomputer or a genius mathematician. But you are saying a one-time pad is different.
A true one-time pad is mathematically unbreakable, no matter how much computing power you have. Here is why. Most codes rely on an algorithm or a repeating pattern. If you find the pattern, you break the code.
Right. That is how Enigma was broken.
Exactly. A one-time pad uses a key that is completely random, and crucially, the key is exactly as long as the message itself. If you want to send a 500-letter message, you use a 500-letter random string of characters to encrypt it.
So there is no repeating pattern for a code breaker to latch onto.
Exactly. Zero pattern. The sender has a pad of paper with these random keys, and the receiver in Moscow has the exact same pad. You encrypt the message using page 1, transmit the gibberish over the radio, and then this is the vital part. You tear off page 1 and burn it.
Oh, wow.
It's never used again. If the interceptor does not have the exact physical pad you used, the ciphertext could mathematically decipher into literally any message of the same length. It is perfect security.
And Smith finds these pads hidden inside the house.
Not just in the handbag. The search of that Ruislip bungalow lasted for 9 exhaustive days. They brought in technical teams who practically disassembled the house.
They tore the place apart, they tapped the walls, they lifted the floorboards. It took them nearly a week just to locate the high-speed radio transmitter, which was buried beneath 2 feet of rubble and concrete under the kitchen floor.
They hid it incredibly well.
They found hidden caches of cash in multiple currencies. They found false passports for a dozen different countries hidden inside a hollowed-out flashlight. And they found an oversized Ronson cigarette lighter that had a secret compartment containing even more secret codes.
When the news broke and the photographs of this spy gear hidden in a suburban home hit the newspapers, the cultural shockwave in Britain was massive. And we have to understand that this was a very specific type of psychological blow to the British public.
Right, because up until this point, the British public associated treason with the elite.
Yes, the public was still reeling from the Cambridge Five-Guy Burgess, Donald Maclean, Kim Philby. Those were aristocratic, elite establishment figures. They went to Cambridge, they belonged to the right exclusive clubs in London, they worked in the Foreign Office.
They were the upper crust.
They betrayed Britain from the very top of the social hierarchy.
But the Portland Ring was terrifying in a completely different, much more visceral way.
It was terrifying because it weaponized sheer, pleasant ordinariness. These were not elite insiders debating high-minded policy in private clubs. This was a foreign ring operating out of a bungalow that looked exactly like millions of other bungalows across the country.
It could have been anyone.
They showed the British public that the smiling, polite neighbors offering you a cup of tea over the garden fence could be highly trained enemy agents. It held a dark, paranoid mirror up to the post-war suburban ideal. It made everyone look at their neighbors twice.
So espionage stops. The ring is broken. The transmitter is dug up. But that brings us to the final act of this story. The human cost and the devastating emotional twist of this whole saga.
Right.
Because what happens to a true believer when the game is finally over and they are forced to confront the reality of their choices?
Well, the British justice system moved swiftly. The trial was a sensation, and the sentences handed down were massive, intended to serve as a brutal deterrent. Gordon Lonsdale got 25 years. Morris and Lona Cohen got 20 years each. Houghton and G, the informants, got 15 years.
And through the entire trial and into their imprisonment, the Cohens maintained this unbelievable stoic silence. They went to maximum security prisons, they were model inmates, and they absolutely refused to confirm their true American identities, let alone cooperate with British intelligence or reveal any KGB secrets.
They had spent 2 decades in a profession where silence meant survival. They were built for psychological endurance. They were not going to break just because they were in a cell.
No way.
But behind the scenes, high-level geopolitical horse trading was already in motion.
The Soviet Union wanted them back. Which really shows you just how highly Moscow valued the damage they had done to the West.
They valued them enormously. To get the Cohens back, the Soviets engineered a vastly asymmetrical trade. They arrested a young British lecturer named Gerald Brooke who was visiting Moscow.
What did he do?
Brooke had been distributing anti-Soviet pamphlets, a relatively minor offense that would normally result in deportation. But the KGB arrested him, threatened him with severe charges, and essentially held him hostage.
Oh, that is ruthless.
They demanded the Cohens in return for his release. After years of agonizing debate, in 1969, the British government caved. Morris and Lona were pulled out of prison and flown to Moscow.
And they arrive in the Soviet Union to a hero's welcome. The state they had served from the shadows finally embraces them in the light. They are given the title Hero of the Russian Federation. They actually get their faces put on postage stamps.
Imagine that.
And they are put to work training the next generation of Soviet illegals, teaching young agents the exact painstaking tradecraft of disappearing into an American or British suburb.
But this is where we have to pause and look deeply at the psychological toll this lifestyle extracted from them. It is very easy to read about microdots and train encounters and get caught up in the thrill of the spycraft. But the human cost of being an illegal is devastating.
Think about what they sacrificed. For 20 solid years, from 1941 to 1961, they lived in a state of permanent performance. They had to suppress their real histories, their real accents, their real memories.
Yeah.
They could not speak freely to their neighbors. They could not have old, genuine friends over for dinner without staying in character.
And taking that a step further, think about moments of deep personal crisis or grief. They could not reach out for the basic human comfort of honesty. They could never be truly known by anyone outside of their handlers.
That sounds incredibly lonely.
That is 2 decades of never being able to drop the mask for a single second. It is a profound, suffocating kind of psychological isolation.
And what sustained them through that incredible, crushing burden was their belief. They believed their isolation had a purpose. They believed they were righteous. They genuinely believed they were accelerating the collapse of an unjust system and making the world safer.
Which is exactly what makes the final twist of their story so emotionally gut-wrenching.
It really is a tragedy because we fast forward to the 1980s. Morris and Lona are living in Moscow. They're aging, and the Soviet Union is entering its final, shuddering economic and political decline.
The system is falling apart.
Lona Cohen is finally seeing the reality of the state she sacrificed her entire life, her identity, and her freedom to build. She sees the legacy of the gulags, the suppression of free speech, the bare shelves in the grocery stores.
And how does she react to that?
Well, in conversations with a Western journalist toward the end of her life, she reportedly labeled the Soviet reality as outright totalitarianism.
That phrase carries an unbelievable crushing weight coming from her. This is not a naive tourist making an observation. This is the woman who carried the atomic blueprints past military police.
Right.
This is the woman who spent a decade in a cold British prison cell refusing to break. For her to look at the Soviet state and call it totalitarianism, it is the ultimate heartbreaking realization that the dream she served had mutated into a nightmare.
It breaks my heart a little, honestly, to give everything, your identity, your freedom, your peace of mind, only to realize at the very end of your life that you were serving a broken machine. As we established, they were not cynical mercenaries looking for a payday.
No.
They were hyper-competent, intensely dedicated operatives who just placed their absolute faith in the wrong utopia.
It is a profound moral tragedy. They died in the 1990s, buried with honors in the KGB cemetery in Moscow. The state they served collapsed shortly after they returned to it.
What about Theodore Hall?
As for Theodore Hall, the teenage prodigy who started the whole atomic chain reaction, his identity as a spy was not even publicly confirmed until the Venona intercepts were finally declassified in the mid-1990s.
He got away with it.
He lived his whole life quietly in Cambridge, England, working as a biophysicist, largely escaping the consequences of his 18-year-old moral calculation.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, let us summarize the staggering legacy of Morris and Lona Cohen. The physical evidence of their lives is mostly gone. The house on Cranley Drive was eventually demolished. Their fake identities are gone. The Soviet Union itself is gone.
Yes.
But their actions, the consequences of those actions reverberate through history. They shortened the Soviet path to the atomic bomb by years, accelerating the nuclear standoff.
They permanently altered the balance of submarine warfare, neutralizing the West's technological advantage.
As our source material beautifully puts it, the work they did remains in the world, permanent as physics.
It is a legacy of tangible, undeniable global impact achieved from the confines of a suburban living room.
Which brings me to the core question I want to leave you, the listener, with today. Think about Theodore Hall and the Cohens. If they were truly acting out of a sane, deeply held belief that no one single nation, not even their own, should own a weapon capable of ending human civilization, are they villains?
It is a tough question.
Or are they just people who made a radically terrifying moral choice in an impossible time?
It forces you to question where the line between treason and a misplaced global conscience actually sits, especially when the stakes are human survival.
Exactly. And here is one final chilling thought for you to mull over as you go about your day. If the true essence of espionage is stealing the present to rewrite the future, what is happening right now?
Oh, that is a scary thought.
Think back to that image of the quiet suburban street we started with. The bicycles on the lawn, the polite neighbors. What permanent physics of our current era? Maybe it is the source code for ascension artificial intelligence. Maybe it is advanced bioengineering blueprints or quantum computing algorithms. What world-ending secret is currently being quietly transmitted from an ordinary-looking suburban living room today, waiting to shift the global balance of power forever?
The technology changes, the ideologies shift, but the Cranley drives of the world are still out there.
Beneath the floorboards, waiting.